Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. You are listening to a podcast by Pastor Eric Deepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. If you enjoy Faith Over Breakfast, we encourage you to rate it on the Apple Podcast app, on Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you and enjoy the podcast.
Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Andy Littleton, and I'm sitting with Eric Deepen, whose microphone is hanging on by a thread. And somehow that launches us, that very topic right there, will launch us into a discussion about his church, the Village Church, my church, Mission Church, some of our differences, the book, The Trellis and the Vine, the idea of excellence in ministry. What do we do with it? The idea of authenticity. What does it mean to be values-driven? People versus programs.
It's all there. You just hear two pastors wandering around talking about their insecurities at some level.
But I think it's pretty relatable stuff.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Enjoy.
Hope you guys enjoy. Thanks. Well, welcome to Faith Over Breakfast, and Andy making lots of noise fixing the mic because he's on a mic that my mother often is on and a whole bunch of other people, and it just doesn't, they don't know what they're doing with that mic.
Well, let's be real. It's I'm looking at your mic, so I was adjusting the what would you call them?
Tension
rubber bands that help it float and not make noise. I like them to all be attached. Usually here at the Village, they're not.
Yes.
And I'm looking at yours, and I think about if I don't know if there's one contact point where your rubber bands are fully attached.
There you go. Well,
so don't put it on your mom is what I'm trying to say.
Hey, I'd like to go even further. We had a bunch of teenagers in here doing a podcast just a couple weeks ago. So.
Yeah.
It's just, it could be anybody and everybody.
And it probably is.
Yeah.
And this is the here's our topic. So, this is the one of the differences between the Village and Mission. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. That often here I'll notice the stuff isn't in perfect condition, or but part of the reason for this is
gently used.
Well, you open it up to everyone.
Yeah.
It's and we do some of that too. But yeah, what's your phrase? Unhindered by quality control?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I would say
quality control exists. We're just not hindered by it.
Yeah. At Mission, we're more hindered than some, not as hindered as others by quality control.
Yeah. Well, I kind of had to get over it. Well, there's a couple stages of getting over it, but I'll tell you one early on when we moved into community house, we redid our floors, and we had this beautiful carpet. And the first week, one of the ladies we lived with, stumbled, and she had a big salad full of olive oil and vinegar.
Yeah.
And it dumped right onto the carpet right as people entered in, and we were never able to get rid of that spot. And so you're just like, well, things just aren't going to stay the way you want. And then we have God knows how many, he does know, children in our church.
Yeah.
And just
well, it's all in how you frame it. Like that spot with the salad can be the thing that you go, oh, there's a spot, or you laugh and it's a personal story, right? And I am so torn.
Yes.
Between this really is our topic, because we're going to talk about the book, The Trellis and the Vine. That's coming up. Okay, I'm just saying. We're gonna talk a little bit about giving ministry away versus doing it all yourself as professionals.
Okay.
So that's where we're headed, Eric.
Okay. Wow. I haven't read The Trellis and the Vine.
That's fine. No,
okay.
A lot of other people haven't either.
I've never even heard of this book.
Well,
who's it by?
You're going to hear about it.
Oh, okay. It's exciting. Did you write it?
I have. No, I didn't write it. I read it.
Okay, you read it.
And probably should reread it. Okay, so
here we go.
I struggle here. You've embraced it more than me.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just say this. But that becomes a story. So you've got the stained carpet, but this is now a person's mark is left. And we have a communion table. We call it the Lord's Supper, but my buddy Sean and I made it years back. We had found we would drive around during bulk trash time and look for treasures. And so we found a table base and thought, well, let's just make a little top. So some scrap wood.
Let's just say this is one of your gifts.
This is one of my gifts.
Yeah.
And so we made this little scrap wood table on a stainless steel table base we found while we were just driving around for bulk trash. And we serve the Lord's Supper on this. We have now for 10 years. It went from Midtown to Mission with us. And one of my favorite things are the nicks and the stains from the wine on the table. And every once in a while, I'll notice somebody running up to wipe it off afterward because a little wine spilled. And I'm like, don't worry about it. If this thing someday just showed wear and tear from the dripping of wine, to me, that would be the most beautiful patina you could ever imagine. So I have that in me, but then if something is like, broken, and unacknowledged, that's a hard thing for me. We rent our building and we have to manage, these things. Like, I've realized I will not love others if I don't acknowledge that, hey, you broke that and I need you to,
to fix it.
Well, fix it at that would be great. Or at least acknowledge that you broke it and, talk to us.
No, that's good. Yeah. Acknowledge that they abused some of your furniture.
At least, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And we have holes in some chairs, and I took these, down to a repair guy recently, and I'd like for them not to have holes in them. It's a part of who I am.
Yeah.
But okay. So that's the situation. I've just noticed at the Village, that's not as big of an issue.
Sure.
You do want to fix things. You guys are putting some new doors on the building, all that. But what I also know about you all is you're in people's lives a lot. Mm-hmm. That's taking up the lion's share of your mind space, heart space,
money space,
everything space. Yeah. And so, maybe some water's getting in under the door.
Yeah, this is how it is.
We'll take a look at it next year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How did you? Has that always been the case for you in ministry? Like, did you? We're going to come back around to this book and everything.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, but did you make a shift ever in your priorities there? Or is that just kind of how you've always seen it?
No. I grew up in a house where environment and quality was really important. So even if
your parents' house is very well kept,
and yes, my mother was a part-time interior decorator, so she did it for other people. And when we started the Village, I wanted to be on 4th Avenue. We wanted to be Mission, maybe kind of more leaning toward Epicenter.
Yeah,
and we did that.
Which, for those, if you haven't followed with us for a while, Mission's my church. Epicenter is a church that merged with a church that I planted that became Mission.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think both communities try to curate experiences.
Yeah.
Differently now, but we were trying. We wanted to be in Arts District. We wanted people who are artists to walk in and appreciate what we do and how we do it. But God did not, that wasn't his intention for our community. I mean, and I think that's where I had to make the change. And I think what you realize is that, and you know this because you have a daughter, that children mess everything up. Like when it comes to just your environment, they pull things down, they easily break things, they spill things. And the more of them you have, that it just is exponential. Yeah. So you have to learn to let go of what you thought was really quality. You have to let go of what you think is good to be on your walls. You have to let go of a lot of things. And so we've done that. And, our biggest thing is not the art shows that we used to do.
Yeah.
We did tons of art shows. Now it's the Makers Camp where we had 44 children in our last camp. That's the big thing.
Yeah.
And people coming to see that kind of art and that kind of experience. So, and also we've always been poor.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean poor in the we're scraping along, but where we spend our money is not as much on curating everything. So yes, we slowly get the doors.
Yeah.
We slowly fix the air conditioning. We do the necessary things. So that's all part of it. Yeah. So that's how we made that transition. I think God just really helped us to let go. Sometimes I think, and even now we're like, well, we need to bring in a professional cleaner to clean all our couches, because people sit in couches. It's kind of gross after a while if they're not professional. And our carpet kids spill every week. Kids are spilling things. Adults are spilling things. It's been less of a problem in the spills since we completely got rid of soda almost and put sparkling water in. So we don't have soda. I mean, there's a few sodas, but the kids usually don't drink them. So when they spill them, sparkling water does not ruin the carpet the way a soda does. But coffee by adults gets spilled, and teenagers, and there's a new huge spot every week.
Yeah,
and the walls need to be repainted. One of the things that we did, one thing that helped us is we actually got Days of Caring. We put ourselves up there, and we got a couple companies to come, and they repainted our whole interior about 5 years ago. Yeah. So that's a way churches can get a little help.
Yeah, absolutely. We, our trick is we just stripped everything back to the bare brick, so there's nothing to paint.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's another end of this spectrum, and this is moving toward not just talking about style and fixing things and cleaning. That I walked away from. So you were talking about you grew up in a home that was very curated, and then I didn't know that you kind of had to let go of a ministry vision in a way from the Fourth Avenue days.
Oh yeah.
So there was a desired style that you had to realize that's not what God gave us.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have thought a little bit through that over the years. That's just natural. And I think seasons of a community's life change that too, right?
Yeah.
My old church, there's this kind of seminal ministry moment for me where I got a job when I was 18 years old at First Church of God here in Tucson. And I bumped into some walls, as young leaders often do, some little things where I was doing something that it was a little different. It was kind of throwing people off. And I had to analyze in my own mind whether this was a legitimate concern or not. And that's a very difficult process for young leaders. And I think to some degree it's necessary. It's almost like coming of age.
Sure.
But one of the things that was said to me, we had just replaced the carpet. And there was a meeting. This was a congregational church, so the whole church would meet and vote on everything.
Yeah.
And somebody brought up there was a Spanish-speaking congregation. I think at this point they were almost the same size as the English-speaking congregation, but they were meeting off in the side, the former sanctuary, which was now a fellowship hall, which is small, didn't have very good technology.
Right.
Just, bare, probably didn't have a great air conditioner or whatever. And somebody said, well, why don't we let them just meet over here? We only need one service. We could have 2 morning services, one Spanish, one English. And in my mind, as an 18-year-old, this was a no-brainer. Like, that's what we should do.
Yeah.
And I'm just kind of listening in, and a older gentleman stood up and he said, I disagree. We just replaced the carpet. We can't, this isn't good stewardship. And Big Mouth Andy, I believe, if I remember this right, I stood up and I said, am I interpreting this correctly, that Mexicans harm carpet more than white people?
Uh-huh.
And It was awkward, and that they didn't make the move at that time to move them in. I was like, unreal. I'm listening, I was going, really? This is a church space made to worship God. It sits empty all the time.
Yeah.
In the Mexican church, what? We say we love them. We say we're one church. Come on. This is, a major oversight. Anyway, later I went to Catalina Foothills Church. Very nice church, very well kept place. And one of the pastors in a meeting, a similar type thing was being brought up, maybe about having a youth event. And he in the meeting, he said, hey, we've been given this building by God so we can wear it out to the glory of God. And I was like, that's more like it, right? Like, oh, there we go. So I've had those two things stuck in my mind, and I've thought I want to be more like the latter than the former. Even if we have nice things, at the end of the day, I want to err on we use them. We let it go. If it gets, I think I've embraced a tension of you can care about your space, you can put in the new carpet, you can not try to destroy it, but you also can have open hands at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that Rod always said that was one of those things you carry with you is, he'd always talk about his car being God's car. And then also every time he bought a new car, he'd go out and get a hammer and hit it once so that it had a dent. So then he was no longer concerned about keeping it pristine. And then he's more comfortable with other people driving it. And people took him up on that. And I think that's a cool thing to hold things lightly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think, it's letting go. It's not, in the end, it's not how you kept your building.
Right.
And how, I think a lot of times this also plays over into excellence.
This is exactly where we're on the same page.
Right.
That's where I was going exactly next was it's not just building. It's this idea of excellence. So how you perform, how services end up going, how everyone appears, how we present, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Right?
So so I used to wonder about this because, the Village, there is a set of musicians in our church when it comes to like music. They're good musicians, but we don't do it traditionally the way other churches do. So we don't have people when, Thursday night practices and there's not a lot of orchestration unless it happens, spontaneously. And so I've always wondered about like, well, if you're a good musician and you come and sit, is this hard for you?
Oh, yeah.
Because, excellence is for some musicians a big deal. Yeah. One of the things I realize is I've been preaching for 24 years, and actually I think I'm a pretty good presenter. And I can sit under people who aren't.
Yeah.
And I can learn a ton.
Yeah.
Because I'm not demanding anything from them. I'm simply enjoying them. And I think that's part of why we see Unhindered by Quality Control is not because we say, don't try to do something excellent. Don't try to bring your gifts forward. Don't try to get better at what you're doing. But the point is not how well you do it. The point is worshiping Jesus.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I need some more time. Can I get more time? Can anyone get more time? Is that a thing? I would like to spend more time being a husband, a dad, neighbor, coworker. I want to spend more time on my faith. I want to be good at my job and not waste time at my job. I want to go down the wrong path fewer times or go down the right ones first. I want to learn how to make more time. This is Making Time, a series where I try to make more time. Time for the good stuff.
No, sorry. I think, correct me if I'm wrong. I think were you nuancing? I was hearing you say it's okay to try to do better. It's okay to try to, okay, because it sounded like you were saying, don't try to be better.
Oh, no. Those are really important.
Yeah.
But that's not the point.
It's not, at the end of the day, not the point. Yeah.
And because we live in a faith where in our weakness, that's where God comes forward. It's not like that we're trying to be intentionally weak.
Right.
But if we're so wrapped up in our performance, we're not really focusing on Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to have the cross and Jesus central to things, as we all. And I think that the other thing is, at least growing up in the church, I experienced you can only do something if you've arrived, not being in process.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make any sense to me. And so people have to practice, and you practice in community, and then you get feedback, kind, good, positive, and instructive feedback.
Now here's a couple of questions. Number one, the whole excellence movement, this is like often listed on a church's values or something like that, and becomes a driver, and it can really lead to people burning out because you have to get everything just right.
Yeah.
But that movement is a response to something. And I think I understand that too. Like there's a version of church that people have experienced where, let's just say sermons, let's keep it something really simple, where it feels like there's not really a deep study or a deep understanding of the text. Or it feels like the work hasn't been put in to communicate it well, to help other people actually grasp it. It's just like I remember when we were doing chapels at the sermons at the prison, chapels at the prison, that there was one of the prisoners said, "Oh, we love when you guys come because you clearly care." He said, "There's this other group that comes that we sing the same song that's on a sheet, and the guy literally teaches the same exact thing." And it's like he's just reading it off a paper. It's like he's checking a box. And they could tell the difference. And there's an excellence in that I think people have responded to. And they've said, look, there's types of ministry where it feels like you either don't care or you're not trying hard to do this well, to communicate the Word of God or to create a situation in which a person could connect with God. You're not trying.
Right.
And so I think that's where it comes from. And then my other, I guess, a question for you would be, are there times at the Village, say when you did the discipleship conference and you invited other people in, are there times where you go, okay, this is going to be a little more, we're going to put in a little more effort? Like, are there venues? Are there moments, when a Christian speaker goes and speaks before, a publishing, symposium? Is that a moment to go, up the game a little bit so that we represent ourselves well? Or is it across the board the same in your mind?
I think at some level, if you're being, and I think that unfortunately people have messed this word up, but when the Village picked it up as a value, I think it was a different understanding. When you are authentic, you are going to try to do your best.
Yeah.
I think Gen Xers, and these are the people who rebelled against the excellent movement of their parents. And I think in the church world, the CEOing and the businessing of the church, that we're going to make this product that's...
The baby boomers were very big on excellence.
Yeah. So, and they were big into the person and the presentation. And I think there's something really cool about a good speaker or a good musician who stops halfway through the song, and says, "Oh, well, we hit the wrong note," or on purpose allows a little dissonance in what they're doing, to be like more honest. Yeah. Because I want an honest performance. I don't want one that oddly enough, that you're trying so hard to be perfect that you're not actually bringing you through. Yeah. So I think it's more about the authentic person being presented. It doesn't mean you don't work really hard.
Right.
I also think what we have said in the church, and this is more where the Village would be, is your family is priority, not a 3-hour band practice every week. Yeah. We would rather you have time with your kids than practice 3 hours. Yeah, we'll practice an hour beforehand. If we write a song and you want to have a collaborative thing, then invite a bunch of people over and collaborate. We're not going to demand that you have these things. Or
now, what if you found out that somebody... That's a great reason, right? Like your family's a priority. But what if, one of your band members, you're like, you know them pretty well, and they can't seem to kind of get their chords right, and you find out that it's not because they're prioritizing their family, it's that they're, you know, amassing a large collection of Yu-Gi-Oh cards and organizing them in a box, and their family's not really getting that. Would you bring that up and say, hey,
get it together, practice?
Well, or like, you know, maybe you need to, for the good of your family and for others, like this thing is actually getting in. Are there moments to bring stuff up?
Sure. And when we're talking about the village and music, like it's the people who are doing it try hard and practice. And most people people don't want to be on stage, at least in our community. So being on stage is something that we have to invite people into, even with our stage off to the side and you're not up front. So that's not usually an issue. I mean, it's hard because I think we're so family oriented at the village that like what you present is what you present, and we really want to embrace that. From knowing you,
I think you'd bring it up.
Sure,
you would bring it up, but not as much about the music. You would bring it up more because they're not focus on the family. Yeah, no, you would say,
sure,
you'd say, hey, I think your wife and kids are suffering because of your Yu-Gi-Oh card thing.
Yeah,
you wouldn't prioritize the church's music.
Yeah, and I think more like where I mean, even like it's often with cooking. I'm like, hey, maybe you need to pay more attention to like this so that there's more of this kind of food around. Like that's more where we.
Well, but that's a big, because you value the hospitality. If the food isn't there because somebody
didn't think about it the way they need to think about it,
you would bring it up.
Yeah.
Because it's a love in action. So the excellent barometer or the dial leans a little more toward the hospitality side and the one anothering than the performance in your case.
Yeah.
And in other churches, maybe it is more on the performance. Maybe. So the Trellis and the Vine, Colin Marshall and Tony Payne, I had to look up the authors. I read this a long time ago, and it did challenge me. I think about it a lot. And like I said, I'm probably due for a reread. But they were saying that in a lot of church communities, they're aiming this at the church community especially, the trellis, they're saying, is the programs, the maybe you've got a meeting space, you've got staff, you've got administration, you've got programming, you've got these things that you want to use this is what you do. And they said that unfortunately what we're usually taught to do and what we end up doing as leaders in religious communities is almost as if we spend a lot of time building this trellis, and we paint the trellis, and we install the trellis, and we show people the trellis. Look what I made for discipling people, and look what we've made for facilitating worship. And then this little vine starts to grow up on the trellis, which is people. People show up, and their little, tentacles start to tear at the paint a little bit, and they, and at some point, it can become easy to go, oh, no, get off there. This is you're messing up, and I'm a trellis builder. I'm very good at trellis building. And you want people from other churches to see your trellis, and you want, people to be impressed by it. And they said, unfortunately, the people become almost a nuisance because you don't have time. If there's all these people all over the thing, you don't have time to maintain it anymore, and the paint's going to get chipped, and some of the joints might even fall apart. But they said, as with a trellis, its whole entire purpose is that people would grow all over it and take over, and that you would actually no longer even be able to see a trellis.
Yeah.
That it would be so about people, and
which is a trellis in itself.
Yeah, and right, and it kind of becomes partially its own structure. Not that you don't care, not that you don't refasten things, but that the appearance of the thing you made would be very second nature. You'd realize whatever you made was for people to use, and so they talk about how their observation of people in ministry was that people in ministry spend way more time on trellises than healthy vines, healthy people. And that's always, it is convicting to me. And even to the point where sometimes I think that's why, and this is leading into my next thought, because of some of my own proclivities toward fixing the microphone and stuff, need a lot of help for our church to be about people.
Interesting.
Because I by nature am much more of a maker creator. I like the story of making the table, and that has a place. But to be a healthy church, other people are going to have to help take care of people.
Yeah.
That's been one of my conclusions.
Yeah, I think, Rod and I were, and I mean, I don't mean to be the, Eric will brag today, but Rod and I were slightly ahead of times because I remember having so many conversations with church planters who were wanting to talk about mission and structure, and we always talked about values.
Yeah.
I think values make a very adjustable trellis because people can come in, and as long as what they want to do or who they are fits in the value system, it doesn't matter what the structures look like.
What you end up doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we had very few things where we're like, yeah, this is the one thing we're going to do. Like eating together. That's something that doesn't adjust. Now, how it adjusts, like what it is, adjusts.
So types of studies, like, is this where you're saying, a church like ours, we do surge tables, and that it's a discipleship tool several churches use here. I like it. But most churches, ours included, are like, all right, so we do surge, and then we we have another curriculum we make or something.
Sure.
You're saying that if a person comes in the village that has the right values and they have an idea, if the values are right, it's like, sure, go for it.
Yeah.
But you have to know the values are right, or else it's not going to be.
And you have to be immersed in the culture for a while before you make that happen. But if you are value driven yourself, you can see like, okay, well, I can fit here, and the church values this, and what I have to offer here. What would that look like? And so people are more given to change what they want to do in order to fit it in. But yeah, I think a lot of it is being willing to change.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, an easy one at the village, it's very obvious, is Susan and I were predominantly the writers of music. Our influences are, Nirvana and Incubus, and like we're all minor chords, and we traveled to Seattle on a regular basis because we wanted to be in that music scene. So that influenced the music that we play and sing and write. And then Mark comes along, and he's like a good old, what do you call it? Sort of folk music.
Yeah.
And he loves folk music, and he loves writing music. So it changed the whole nature and sound of our music. But he understands the values, and the value of the music at the village is that it is to tell our story.
Yeah.
And so he tells the story of the village to the music. We worship that way. We're all good with it. Yeah. And I tease him about it, but he changed the sound, and that happens in a lot of different areas. Like our whole discipleship model that we're in now, Pilgrim Groups, was not started by me. It was invented by one of the leaders in our church who wanted to develop a discipleship thing, and so he began to work it out, and it evolves and changes, and it keeps evolving and changing as leaders and people bring where their spirituality is, and it fits in the value systems. There's a structure for it to fit in, but it's their offering, it's not ours. Things become like a think tank, so to speak, within, a container. So I think that's, it's not always conducive to rapid growth. I think that's the thing. Yeah. Authenticity and value-driven ministry struggle to have rapid growth.
Yeah.
They're slow-moving entities, even in the business world.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know.
Because you can't just franchise it and replicate it and sell it. Like, all these other, like, if you're say, just speaking from that trellis metaphor, you create a really great curriculum that's marketable, and you can, like literally people do, they sell it.
Yeah.
And that helps fund more stuff, right? Yeah. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but it's harder for it to be value-driven or authentic to a community.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, and this is where the village probably sticks out more than other churches is that we have no problem failing.
Yeah.
That didn't work. Oh, well.
Yeah.
We'll kill
Life
it
goes
and
on.
go do something else. But somebody learned something.
Yeah.
Right? I learned something. And so that's, just be willing to practice and try something. If it didn't work, didn't work. That's okay.
Yeah.
Don't be down on yourself. You learned something in the process.
Right.
Whereas I think you can't have failing things. That you need to make sure you prepare, get ready for the launch, make sure it's going to be a successful ministry.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and that doesn't mean preparedness isn't important. And the larger you get, you got to, but.
The part of the excellence, you've got to wonder, there's a good side of wanting to do things well, but is there a side of avoiding being perceived as a failure?
Yes.
Yeah.
So here's the example I try to give people. Like one of the things, and I hate to bring Mars Hill Church up again and Mark Driscoll, but for a long time this church had a big influence on us.
Yeah.
And so we go up there. Now my wife had a scholarship to college for music.
Yeah.
She's a highly trained pianist. She can play bass and guitar. She can sing. But she is in the end just a mid-level musician.
Yeah.
She could never ever lead worship at Mars Hill.
Right.
And probably not even in their extended campuses because she wasn't good enough.
Right.
But she's got gifts and talents. They're just, she doesn't have the 5 talents, right? She has maybe the 2 or the 1.
Right.
And so a lot of times there's a lot of people sitting in communities with gifts and talents, but they're not the best teacher and they're not but we don't provide opportunity for them. And I think that's partly with the village doesn't always do it well, but we're trying really hard that the community itself can learn and grow in its gifting.
I guess that gets to my thing I'm working out of needing others. One of the realizations I've had, right, is that when you need others and you involve others, so part of it is, so one way of framing it, and it's probably not even my favorite, is I don't have it all. I have certain gifts, and so I need help. That's
not a bad leadership place to be.
It's not the worst.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
Actually. Yeah, I think.
But the flip side of it is not just I need help, it's others have gifts.
Yes.
And it's meaningful and empowering for them to get to use it. And not just that they need to be empowered, but the point is, like, God gave them gifts for the sake of the work of the ministry, says the scripture, all of us. And that's been dawning on me more is there's a fine line in there somewhere that I struggle with, but I think what I've concluded is I need to let more go in order to let more people exercise their gifts. But I've realized people who are exercising their gifts, it's a mixed bag, but many of them do want your involvement. They want to do them well. And some of them are hindered by their own quality control measures, and they need people to walk with them and encourage them and teach them things. And,
Well, and I think one of the most powerful things for me, is to sit under, be around someone doing something that I could be doing,
right?
Have it not be as good. Sit under the uncomfortability of it, because that's where Jesus is going to meet me. That because I have to face my demands that things be a certain way, that things are perceived in a certain way. Like I have to face that.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for peace and joy? Do you want to refresh your life and raise your well-being? You need Create Harmony. At Create Harmony, we focus on everyday joys and we savor life's blessings. Our episodes are filled with creativity and fun, and we believe in setting an intentional rhythm. Listen in to Create Harmony to learn how to use your imagination as a way of listening to God and remind yourself how to notice goodness all around you.
Do you think that's a fear we have, is that something could be perceived as not as good, and that could reflect on us? Do you think we leader types also have the fear that, let's name 2 I could think of. One, that actually it's going to be better. what they offer.
Yeah.
Or number two, that like it's going to be, well, if we give it away, who am I?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do I matter
Yeah.
if other people can do it?
Then why do I matter?
Why do I matter?
It's interesting, and I think that's odd because I think what I face is I don't face the one of what do I matter, and I'd be curious, or I don't.
I don't as much either personally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the one that I do face the one, especially when people listen, say, to a speaker at the village,
Yeah.
they're like, oh man, he's so good. I wish he'd speak more. What I hear is you suck, and they should be doing it more. And that's, again, another thing I have to face.
Yeah.
But then it's, oh, these new people came, they heard this person, or they experienced this thing. Oh, man, I hope they don't think this is the regular thing or whatever.
I probably deal with that more, and there's an arrogance in that, and I've been pleasantly, accidentally rebuked by the fact that people have come plenty of times when I wasn't there and had a great day.
Yes.
And honestly, I love that. I've embraced that, and I've learned to come back and go, great. Like, because at the end of the day, I could get in a car accident tomorrow, and my hope would be that this church doesn't live on Andy.
Yeah, well, there's
You
a
know?
there's a guy who's been in our church, and I would meet with, and he would give me what he called the Eric gets run over by a car rating for the church.
Yeah.
At what percentage is the church at where it can operate without you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's important, not just because you could get run over by a car, but because you could have a hard time.
Yeah.
You could get tired.
Yeah.
There could be another calling for you. And if your church is now in a lurch, and this is where a lot of churches go into turmoil. I mean, we were just talking about one here in town that's going to have to find a new leader. And that often means the person who is holding the whole thing together. Right. And when it is, like, sometimes churches there's the version of the church under that one leader just crumbles. And how many stories have we heard of people who were like, well, I went to that church under so-and-so and it's great. And then everything changed. And if while you're at your church, it can run without you, chances are it's going to not change so dramatically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's, there you go. It's the struggle of being a leader in a community. Yeah. And this is all back to like things being broken. Can you accept,
can you live with it?
Can you live with it? And
I think if, and why I recommend people come to the village all the time, actually. And I would never say to somebody, oh no, they don't take care of their stuff. I tell them to come here because you are really great with people. So.
They take care of their stuff. So
and I never tell people to come to our church because we take care of our stuff. That's not the point.
There's a guy who comes to our church, and he's in ministry, so he does stuff in other places. But he came on a regular basis, and it took me a while to figure out he was married. And I was like, oh hey, like where, what's your wife doing? He's like, oh, like she and I go to, like, I mean, he works in a ministry where they are both part of it. I just can't talk about who he is on air, for a lot of reasons. But he's like, yeah, I love the village. When I come here, I love that I sit in these couches and they're a little dirty and they're well used.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is my vibe. This is my hippie thing. My wife,
not her vibe.
She wants pews. She wants them to be clean. She wants she needs a very pristine place to worship God. And so that's where we go. But I have to come here.
Yeah.
I think so. I understand that that is part of the body of Christ, which is beautiful, is that God is creating these spaces because he's created such diverse people that they need different places to be that resonate with them and point them towards Jesus. And so I'm happy, and we can share what we learn in those processes, but we all have a culture.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. I got to share with church planters a couple weeks ago in the denomination we're kind of connected to, both you and I. And the thing I wanted to share was that we don't need these all to look the same. And And I hope you don't just take a model of everything that you did before or saw somewhere and try to like plaster it onto a new place. Because the church, we need leaders who go all over the place and then ask the question of what would a healthy church that grows up out of this soil look like? Mm-hmm. And so there are innumerable answers. You discovered yours in that process of not being on 4th Avenue and everything. And it works. The people who are here, they probably, and I think you've heard this, I believe you've said this, and we hear this at Mission, where they've said, this is like the first time a church has felt like it. Yeah. And that's the kind of bummer is if they move somewhere else, it's hard. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, the upside to that is if we were thinking about that all over the place, there'd be a lot more chance that people would find a place where they're like, yeah, these are my people following Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do think in the world there are, roadside churches, the ones visible, and then there are destination churches. Yeah. And Mission and Village are destination churches.
And it's okay that all those exist.
Yeah. Everybody goes to Walmart.
Yeah. I try not to, but every once in a while. No, I agree.
Right? Sometimes that more resonates with them than the little boutique store.
And I've noticed that at different stages on somebody's spiritual journey, a different type of community works. And and that doesn't. Some people start in the boutique, right? Mm-hmm. Other people, it's like the big one with the show where everything's refined because that's the most relatable. Like if tonight you and I were going to the Sunday night slow jam, concert at Desert Diamond Casino, I guarantee you that is going to be well produced and there's going to be a light show. If that's when I go to an event, it looks like that. The chance of walking into the Village and experiencing that as home is low. Yeah. I'm probably going to go to one of the big churches with a big show. That's where I would start. By nature.
Yeah. So, well, all that because you fixed the mic.
There you go. Look at that. What a day.
What a day. Well, guys, thank you for listening to Faith Over Breakfast. I think we'll have some more summer podcasts. I'm around. So yeah, we'll be chatting to you about random things.
Yeah. I think I'm out 1 week in July, Eric. Otherwise I'm here.
And I'm not out at all. So you won't get a lot of replays.
Cool.
So thanks for listening.
You can email us
at faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com. You can text us in the send us a text. You can support us in the support us spot.
Yeah. You can tell all your friends.
Please do.
There you go.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Faith Over Breakfast with Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. Please share us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you.